Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to do a linear regression using your TI graphing calculator. So you use a linear regression whenever you have data and you want to fit a linear model to that data. So like a linear graph, linear equation. There are other kinds of regressions with other types of functions to be discussed later. To walk you through the calculator steps, I'm going to use my table that's seen on the left here, where I have two quantifiable variables, first being a year of teaching, and second being percentage of sanity. I'm going to walk you through the steps here on the right and write the key buttons down, but you will also have access to full calculator instructions that are a lot more in depth for you to review in your own free time. Okay, step one is just to enter data into your calculator. To do this, you're going to want to go to the stat button on your calculator. This is technically a statistics topic because we're working with data, which makes sense why you would choose stat. So here's what your calculator looks like. On the left is the keyboard and the right is the screen. The stat button is right next to the arrows circled here. It says stat instead of statistics. Click that. You're going to open up this 3-column screen where you have edit, calc for calculate, tests we will rarely use. Okay, edit is where you're going to enter in your data. Calc or calculate is where eventually we'll go to calculate things. So once you get to edit, you just hit enter and you're going to come up with what kind of looks like a table, but you have way more table space than you need. Since we have two variables, we're going to use the first two columns titled L1 and L2, and you're going to enter in your X to L1 comes first and then your Y into L2. So my X variable is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nice and easy to enter. All you do is type in the number, hit enter, type in the next number, hit enter, and you can enter your table. I'm going to pause the video to finish this column, and you can type in the same to your own calculator. Okay, I have all my X data entered. Now I want to do my Y data in the next column. So you're going to use the arrow to the right to get over there. And now you're going to repeat the process, entering in your Y variable. In this case, that was my percent sanity. Again, I'm going to pause the video to enter this, and then I'll come back as you do it yourself. Okay, I have all of that data entered in. Got my X's and my Y's. Make sure that for every X you have a corresponding Y. If you had more data in one column than the other, you would get an error. Now what you want to do is you want to be able to get a visual of this data. Okay, so when you look at this graphing calculator, the stat is where you're going to enter data. Graph is how you visualize data. That makes sense because that's what a graph is. So next we're going to go over and hit that graph button. You get a coordinate plane here. But you're going to notice that coordinate plane, I can't see anything. I don't see any data. I don't see any lines. And that's because there's a little bit more work to do to get this to show up. I'm going to walk you through those steps right now. Writing a little note to ourselves and the note sheet here. So stat is where you enter data. The reason you can't see your data right now is because your stat plots need to be turned on to see data. Okay, basically what you're saying is turn the stat graph on because your calculator does more than just statistical topics. So to do that, the stat plot button is above the Y equals, as you can see up here. To get to any of these blue buttons, I need to hit second because it's the second function of that button. So I'm going to hit second Y equals, which will take me to stat plots. And as you can see, all of our stat plots are off. We want them on. So if you turn number 1 on, that's enough. Go ahead and hit enter. You'll get to the on and off option, hit enter on the on. Now your stat plots are turned on. So when you hit graph, you'll be able to see what we call a scatter plot. Okay, scatter plot is like a graph where you're graphing data. It's going to look something like this. Okay, so let's say you have a regular coordinate plane X and Y. The X-axis was my years of teaching. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10, but I'm not going to do this by hand. At year 1, we were at 100%. Year 2, we were at 95. Year 3, we're at 90. 4, 5. It's going to look something like this. And as we went, you'll notice it wasn't perfectly linear. So like my stat plot might not be linear. It might look even like this. But essentially a scatter plot is just visualizing data on a coordinate plane, not necessarily in any shape, just a random plot of data. Okay, so once those are turned on, I should be able to see it. So we're going to hit graph again, see if we can see it. And you'll see we still don't see it. The reason for that is because right now the default is to only see values up to 10. So we're actually going -10 to 10 on both axes. And hopefully you remember from my data that my sanity went from 100% to 50%, which is definitely bigger than 10. So that's why we cannot see in our calculator right now. In order to change this, you're going to use the window button. I'm going to write that down in our notes. Make sure to view the scatter plot. You adjust your window. And your window should match what numbers you have in your data. So not everybody will have to do this. It depends on what kind of data you have, but mine, we definitely need to adjust it. So you're going to click the window button, and you're going to see X min, X max first. That means the minimum X can be and the maximum X can be. And if you remember from my data, my X went from 1 to 10. And right now my minimum is -10, my maximum is +10. So that will work for this data set. Although sometimes I like to, if it's at 10, it's going to be all the way at the edge. So sometimes I'll make it like a little bit larger than my maximum, just so I can see everything not on the edge of the screen. X scale just tells you that you're going up by ones. So every increment is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of going up by 5s or 10s. I'm going to leave that for my graph. Y min and Y max is the same as the X min, X max. It's just on the other axis. What's the highest and lowest you see going up or down? And for my data, I have the highest as 100% and the lowest is 25% for my Ys. So that's what needs to be changed. Specifically my maximum, I need to be able to see all the way up to 100. And I'm going to go a little bit beyond 100. I'm going to put it as 125, so it's not all the way at the edge. And then once that's adjusted and you hit graph, you should be able to see a scatter plot, which is what you see in your screen here. Scatter plots are extremely important for being able to visualize what's going on in your data. So as I'm looking at this, I'm already starting to think like, hey, this is kind of linear. You got this outlier here. It's not perfectly linear. And you're starting to make those descriptions of your data. All right, what's next? So we already have entered data in, we viewed our scatter plot, made sure to adjust our window. Next, we have to calculate the regression equation. In this case, it'll be a linear equation. And how do we write a linear equation? So remember back to Algebra 1, typically we see our equations in y equals mx plus b form, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. There's also something called point slope, but your calculator is going to give it to you in this form, which is called slope-intercept. Keep that in mind. I'm going to show you how to get that. You don't actually have to come up with it yourself. The calculator does it for you. So remember, regression is a statistics topic. So we're actually going to go back into statistics or stat button to make some calculations. Before we were in edit to put the data in. Now you're going to arrow right to calculate, and you're going to see all these options for different calculations you can make with your data. And in this case, we want a linear regression equation. Which one of these looks like linear regression? Technically number 4 and number 8, but ax plus b is kind of like mx plus b. Your calculator just uses an a. So we're going to select that one, number 4, and hit enter. I'm going to pause here and go back to the screen and write down what we just did. So you have to hit stat, then you have to go to calculate, and then you have to hit number 4, which said linreg. Linreg for linear regression. Okay, button number 4. Going back to our calculator, it gives you a few prompts. Xlist means where are your X's stored. If we went back into our stat edit, they were stored in L1. So the nice thing is this is actually usually set up for you. Is it already says L1, your Y's are in L2, so that all matches up. Don't worry about this. We'll get back to that later. I just want to get the equation now. So we're going to hit enter on the calculate, and look at that. Your calculator gives you an equation. Their equation is y equals ax plus b, just like mx plus b, but with an a. And they tell you a, or your slope, is negative 6.59 and so on. And your b is your y-intercept, is 109.46667. You can fill those in to get the equation. So in this case, my equation is y equals, let's copy that down, negative 6.5, yeah, we'll go 59, 2 decimal places. That's your slope, so negative 6.59x plus b. Your b is plus 109.4. I'm going to round to 2 decimal places, so the 6 rounds up the 6 to 7. And now I have an equation I can use to analyze this data. We'll talk about what you can do with that equation more later. Almost done. We just need to view the line of best fit. So we saw the scatter plot, but I want to see like hey, what's that line going to look like? Which I could estimate, and I could say, maybe the average line is going to look like this. Because it kind of takes all that data and averages it. But your calculator will give it to you exactly. So that's why we don't do it by hand. We use our tools. If you hit graph, you're not going to see the line yet. Okay, I actually skipped over this step in the last step, but we're going to show you how to do that now. So if you hit stat, calculate, we're going to go back through what we just did. Okay, with what I left out, you can't see the line. But if you do the linear regression thing again, okay, this spot that I skipped, it said store regression equation. Okay, we actually want to tell the calculator to take the equation it comes up with and store it in the graphing function. And if we store that equation there, it'll show up on the graph. To explain this, I have to show you something, and then I'll come back to the directions. Okay, so normally when we enter an equation to graph, we enter that equation in y equals, which makes sense because when you write an equation to graph anywhere, you say like y equals 3x plus 1 or like y equals x squared. So y equals is where you'd enter an equation, such as 3x plus 1. And if you hit 3x plus 1 and you hit graph, I'll see the line for 3x plus 1. That's not what we're doing today, though. I just wanted to show you that y equals is where you store equations. I'm going to go back to where I was before. So I hit stat, calculate, lin reg, go back to store regression equation. We want to tell our calculator to store the equation it comes up with into that y equals. Okay, the way you do that is you hit this vars button that's below the arrows here. Vars stands for variables. Let's write that down. Okay, so in order to view the line of best fit, you have to store the, I think it goes reg equation into the vars button. We'll circle it because it's a button. Okay, so we're going to hit that vars button, and you're going to see all these different columns here. You're going to arrow over to y vars because that's y variable. We want to store it into y equals. Hit enter, and it's going to give you all the different options. It actually doesn't matter which one you pick. This is just like the first row of equations. Y2 is the second one, so on and so forth. So you should just choose the first. And this says store regression equation into y1, which is going to put it where I showed you before over here. It's going to put it in y1. If you put y2, it would put it here. If you put y9, it would put it here. I'm going to repeat that just so I can go back to where I was. So stat, calculate, lin reg. It's going to make me do it again so you can watch this step one more time. Variables, y variables, enter, put it in y1. Now we're going to calculate it again, and it's going to store this equation in my graph. Okay, so that is the equation that your calculator came up with. That is the graph for y equals negative 6.59x plus 109.47. Let me just write this down as a reminder that you went from vars, or the variable button, and you put the graph in y vars, and that's how you stored it. Okay, just to show you a little bit more on that. So once you click the y equals, you'll see your equation is literally stored exactly, not even rounded, in y1, just like you told your calculator to do. So that is how you view a scatter plot, get a scatter plot, calculate a regression equation, and view the graph on your TI calculator. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed.